Hi, in this section of the course we're going to look at functions. Now functions are first-class functions. All functions in Python are first-class functions. What do we mean by first-class? First, let's define what a first-class object means. It's a pretty standard definition. An object is a first-class object if it has the following characteristics. It can be passed to a function as an argument. Right? An integer can be passed to a function as an argument. Can be returned from a function. An integer can also be returned from a function. It can be assigned to a variable. Well, an integer can be assigned to a variable. And it can be stored in a data structure, such as a list or a tuple or any data structure that we have. Well, of course, integers can be stored in lists and tuples and dictionaries and so on. So any object that has these characteristics is called a first-class object. So most of the objects we've seen, actually all of the objects we've seen so far, like int and floats and lists and tuples, all these are first-class objects. But functions are also first-class objects. First of all, functions are objects, we've seen that before, but moreover, they also have these characteristics. A function can be passed to a function as an argument. A function can be returned from a function. A function can be assigned to a variable. And a function can be stored in a data structure. So we can have, an element in a list that happens to be a function. So that's possible as well. So all functions in Python are first-class objects. And so we refer to them as first-class citizens or first-class functions. Higher-order functions is another term that we'll come across, and that's pretty straightforward. Higher-order functions are simply functions that either take a function as an argument. So for example, the simple timer that we wrote in the last section of the course, right? It was a function that ran another function and timed it. So it took that function that it was going to run as an argument. Therefore, that timing function was a higher order function because it took in a function as an argument. But a higher order function can also be a function that returns a function. Remember, functions are first-class objects, so they can be passed to functions and they can be returned from functions. So a function that either takes in or returns a function is a higher order function. And we haven't seen those yet, but we're going to see that a lot, especially when we cover decorators in the next section, where we have functions that return functions, and also when we look at closures and things like that. So some of the topics in this section, we're going to focus on function annotations and documentation. Then we'll look at lambda expressions and anonymous functions. We'll look at callables, and really we're just going to redefine what is a callable, what are the different callable types in Python, and we'll take a look at that with a little bit of code as well. Then we'll look at function introspection. Now, that's kind of interesting. This allows us to use code to look at the metadata essentially of a function. What are its parameters, for example, and other properties too. And then we'll look at some of the built-in higher order functions, like sorted, which allows us to sort things, right? Sort iterables. Then we'll look at other things as well, like map and filter. These are both built-in functions that are higher order functions. We'll also look at the functools module that has a lot of higher order functions as well. We'll look at some of them. We'll look at reduce, for example, and we'll look at other ones like all and any as well. And then lastly, we'll also look at something called partials and partial methods. And that's kind of interesting. That allows us to do some interesting stuff. So we'll take a look at that at the end of this section. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.